Hey everyone, it's Book Crazy Katie, and today's video is my review with spoilers of Little Fires Everywhere by Celestine, and please check me out on social media at the following.
Hey everyone, it's Book Crazy Katie, and today I want to talk to you guys about Little Fires Everywhere, which I read on my Kindle, so I just have an image up on my phone of the book. I don't know how to do the whole editing a photo in and having it just in the corner of the screen, so this is what we got. I've been familiar with this book. It was all over BookTube like a couple years ago, and I also read Everything I Never Told You by Celestine, which is her young adult. It was labeled as a mystery. I'd say it's more of a historical fiction novel that took place in the 70s, dealing with a Chinese family and all the secrets they had within their family that also helped explain the complexity of and mysteries of the daughter and how much they really didn't know each other, and which led to them not quite understanding the events that led up to her death and not knowing what happened to her. And then, but Little Fires Everywhere is an adult novel, and I'd say it's more contemporary, even though it takes place in the 1990s. And it deals a lot with family. It also deals with organization, and it also in rules and when rules should be followed and when they shouldn't. And then it also deals with some race relations throughout. Even though I feel like the race stuff is a little bit more subtle, like Everything I Never Told You, I feel like had a little bit, just drew more on that since it dealt with a Asian American family or a blended family in that context, and dealt a lot more with this stuff. And it also took place in the 70s, which was pretty rife with that kind of stuff going on at the time. The main plot of Little Fires Everywhere follows two families. One of them is a mother and daughter team that pretty much moved around most of the daughter's life. The mother is very mysterious. She's a photographer. She moves anytime she wants to, and this time when they end up in Shaker Heights, Ohio, she promises her daughter that they're going to stay put this time. Pearl is 15, 16 in the novel, I want to say it was. The other family is a traditional family that follows the rules, and for the most part, or on the surface, it seems like they follow the rules. And then you got Elena Richardson, Mr. Richardson, which I think his first name was Bill, and then you got their four kids, Lexi, Trip, Moody, and Izzy. And each of them have their own personalities and things going on. Lexi's the do-right, goody-tissues girl, been in a serious relationship. She's in an interracial relationship with Brian. And then you have Trip, who is the oldest son, and he's the jock. Then you have Moody, who seems like the really sensitive one and caring, but kind of a little on the nerdy side or something. And then you have Izzy, who is the rebellious young teenager and super moody, and her mom and her have an interesting relationship. And then there's a subplot in the book that deals with a book that has to do with an adoption and process. You got another two families, or kind of two family units fighting for one child. One, you got the single mother who is an immigrant from China, and she's young and low income person. So this also has some class struggle in it too. She's young, and Phoebe is young and Chinese immigrant, and she was suffering from postpartum depression, or it seems that she was suffering from postpartum depression. And so she one day takes her baby to the fire station and puts her at the fire station about a half hour before it opened in all her clothes and stuff, because she didn't know what to do, and she like the next day she didn't quite remember what she was doing and was frantic trying to find her baby and went everywhere trying to look for her baby. And then you have this other couple that I cannot think of their name right now, so you got the McCulloughs, and they have spent many years trying to first have babies on their own, and the wife experienced multiple miscarriages and a stillbirth, and they went to the doctors to try to figure out what they could do, and were told that they were infertile. And they went to the doctor and were told that they were infertile, and from there on they tried to adopt after years of trying to have a baby. And this part of the book was a pretty big struggle for me, and just all this stuff with motherhood, like these issues with motherhood really matter, and kind of feel like there should be some kind of trigger warnings in a lot of reviews for this, because trying to become a parent, it seems like it's not that hard, but if you do have any trouble, all this stuff is pretty emotional, whether it's infertility, the adoption, all of this stuff really, you know, can be pretty emotional and has emotional impacts on families that have had to deal with these kinds of things. So, but even, I'm happy I read this book when I did, and I didn't read it about like 5-6 months ago. This would have been a more difficult read for me, if not. But the book is really good, and it makes you think. One of the things that I think really helps this book stand out is the point of view it's written in. I know a lot of people don't like third person in general, and then like I feel like even fewer people like third person omniscient, and a lot of times I see when a book's written in third person omniscient, people think that it's skipping point of view all the time, which it's not doing. The point of view is third person omniscient, which means that it allows the author to let you see inside everybody's head, which, and their motivations, which I've always personally preferred. So, and I think in this case it works really well because it helps jump back into the flash. Like they can, like Celestine can do the flashbacks at any point and doesn't necessarily have to fill them up. For some people that can get a little lost and confusing. And for the most part, I liked her use of it and stuff. There was a point where like 2 or 3 chapters was spent on the character Mia, which is the single mother Pearl's background, and you find out what the mystery behind her has been the whole time, and behind Pearl's birth, because you don't know who Pearl's father is or anything like that. And there's another little subplot just with Mia's backstory, and she was in college and ended up finding out that her financial aid got canceled for the second year of her college and needed money right around the same time that this guy had noticed her and saw how much she resembled his wife, and him and his wife were looking for a surrogate because his wife had no uterus, and so she was unable to have children. So it also deals with sterility in this novel too. It pretty much takes all the different things. But other than like the ability to have children, all the decisions that mothers make get brought up into question. And one thing that I really liked about this is at the end of the book, I just closed out of it. At the end of the book, the author is answering some questions, you know, and they asked her about the motherhood subject, and she put, motherhood seems to be a no-win battle. However you decide to do or not do it, someone's going to be criticizing you. And so, no matter what parents do, somebody's going to think that they're doing it wrong, and that's not always necessarily the case. I was also with Mia's like story, Mia and Pearl's thing, just thinking about how, like, when I was a child and watching TV and stuff, a lot of times critiques would come up on single motherhood, you know, single parents and stuff, and women becoming mothers without having the father around, and like a lot of, you know, facing a lot of judgment from people because of that. And so, since the book took place in the 90s, I don't know if that also impacted. It didn't say anything specifically in this, but it's definitely a novel that made me think, and I feel like it's along the lines of like a Jodi Picoult or a Leanne Moriarty novel, and I like really enjoyed it, and it was definitely a little bit of a roller coaster, but I was able to hold it together for the most part. I want to touch on like some of the like biracial stuff with the adoption that the McCulloughs were trying to do, and the trial between Phoebe and the McCulloughs trying to decide who gets the baby. And in that case, that's something where you felt bad for both sides. You know, you felt bad for Phoebe a little bit, but at the same time, you kind of look at it like, okay, she kind of abandoned her kid and wasn't doing the greatest before that to take care of her baby, but she really seems to like want to try to do better. And you do look at the fact that she was single and alone in a new country, in a new area, and all by herself. I already said single. But, and you feel sorry for her, and you look at the fact that she had postpartum, and you know that postpartum depression could cause mothers to do some pretty irrational kinds of things. And then you look at the McCulloughs, who have been trying to have children, been trying to adopt, and something after another kept on happening where they didn't end up with their baby. And so like you felt bad for both of them, but it also looks at the race. The McCulloughs were a white affluent couple, whereas you got the Asian unwealthy lady that's single parent trying to get her kid. And so it was looking at race, and it was looking at whether or not Mei Ling or Mirabelle, which is the baby's name, on both sides of the family, you know, they were looking at whether or not the McCulloughs would be able to raise her and make sure that she receives like her cultural heritage and be, you know, be able to raise an Asian baby. And another thing with race is you had Lexi and her boyfriend Brian. They were 18 years old, and they were at a party one night, and they decided at that moment that that would be a good time to finally have sex. And then over the next few months, you know, they're having sex, they're trying to be careful at times, but they weren't like perfect about it. And Lexi ends up pregnant, and she doesn't tell Brian or anyone else that she's pregnant. But one thing does happen, like, as a result of this whole, like, adoption trial and parental rights trial thing that's going on. Lexi really, the McCulloughs were friends with, I forgot to say this earlier, but the McCulloughs were friends with the Richardsons, and Phoebe and Mia worked together, and Mia got to learn everything about like Phoebe's life, which is how she was able to tell Phoebe where her baby was, and how the whole like subplot started out. And so Lexi was at first just thinking that, hey, the McCulloughs have been taking care of the kid, they should be able to get their kid. But as things happen to her, she kind of changes her mind a little bit and kind of feels more sympathetic towards Phoebe. But Brian and Lexi end up conceiving a child, and Lexi talks about it hypothetically with Brian, like, what if we had a child now kind of thing. But she doesn't just come out and say, hey, I'm pregnant, you know, what are we gonna do? So he never even learns that she was pregnant in the first place. Lexi makes the decision based on his answer to have an abortion. However, when they're talking about the trial that was going on, um, Lex Brian was talking about how his parents were split on the subject and stuff, and there's like one point where, like, from Brian's point of view, he was thinking that it was something about seeing the baby, the Asian baby in the white woman's arms didn't look right. So, like, even though he was in a biracial, like, relationship and stuff, like, I don't know how well he would have come to terms with having gotten a white girl pregnant. And so it was an interesting little contrast, and, you know, that's another thing that's kind of where the whole, like, race things kind of got handled in this book, because I guess Shaker Heights is a real town in Ohio, and Celestine grew up there, and it's super organized and has all these rules. And when the city was founded, it was specifically founded to try to, like, bring in other races and be more culturally acceptable, but it wasn't. It still had the same problems that the rest of America has with racism and stuff, and prejudice, and, you know, prejudices, however the right way, just say prejudice. Having problems with prejudice, just like every other, like, town or place in the country, or probably in the world in general, have, even though they were trying to, like, make it a culturally diverse area on purpose. Everyone has their own preconceived ideas, and sometimes when you think that you're not gonna react a certain way in a situation, you don't really know until you get there. And I think even with the motherhood family kind of situations, like, everything that got presented in the book is pretty much, the characters might not have thought this is how they react in a given situation, but when something happened that put them in that sort of situation, they didn't necessarily react the way they would have thought they had. And so I think the book's intent is to make people think about these kinds of things and stuff. And like I said, I really enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I highly recommend the book. Just know that it's a little heavier than it sometimes seems, but it's pretty great. Bye.